Jan. Thank you for being here today. My name is Zvezdana. I'm a student at the University of Political Sciences in the University of Belgrade. I've been in Oikos for almost 3 years, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. Can you please introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, Zvezdana. It's so nice to be with you today on this call, and it's wonderful to contribute to the wonderful work of Oikos, which is a long-standing ally of the Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative. My name is John North. I am based in George in the Southern Cape of South Africa, and I work with the Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative, or the GRLI. I'd like to introduce myself by sharing a little bit of what we at the GRLI call our whole person biography. So a short narrative of who I am, not just professionally, but as an entire human being. I often say that I aspire to living a life of essentialism, and that my role or purpose is to be an integrative entrepreneur. A little bit about my history. I grew up in a very safe and loving space, very much insulated within a bubble that was Apartheid South Africa. Growing up in Pretoria, the capital of the country, I was raised in an area where it was very much privileged people that were definitely not racially or ethnically integrated, and I had a high school experience that did not convey to me the complexities and the realities of the world outside of my immediate city and social boundaries. I went to university and spent some time working in Johannesburg and later in Ireland and in the UK. And now I'm back in South Africa, happily living here in the garden route, but working globally with the Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative. I'm a husband, I'm a dad to two girls of 8 and 10. I enjoy cycling, mountain biking, the occasional round of golf, surfing, which is always nice around these parts. But as I said, my social milieu and my context has changed a lot over my lifetime. I'm now 42 years old, but I'm simultaneously turning 22 and 62, depending on what you ask me, what time of the day you're asking me. And when I was 12 years old, around me it was only white people that were very nationalistic. But by the time I was 18 years old, I was a waiter at Nelson Mandela's inauguration. So the fragility and the resilience of so-called social constructs, realities that we as humans shape for ourselves, and that we comply to, that fragility and resilience of those social constructs keeps me awake at night. I hold a question about whether we can activate a gene in all of us that makes us globally responsible, that helps us consciously connect how we live, how we learn, and how we lead. Professionally, during my undergrad course, I started 2 small companies. One was an information architecture consultancy, and another was an online fly fishing store. So I was an entrepreneur who built websites and sold fly fishing equipment and things like that. But having had a liberal arts undergrad, I realized that I need to know a little bit more about business. So I enrolled for an MBA, which seemed like a logical next step. Business school was followed by a career at a major management consultancy. And so that turned me into the proverbial man with the hammer for whom every problem looks like a nail. I ended up founding the Sustainability Consulting Division in the Ireland office of a large firm. But I couldn't reconcile the notion of increasing shareholder wealth with transforming business to become sustainable. And so to this day, I remain a recovering management consultant. So that's a little bit of a longer introduction than perhaps you were looking for, but it should give you a flavor of some of the conflicted nature of my own background and also the questions that keeps me awake at night.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for taking part in this program and for being with us today. I know that you have really amazing story about different competences, about self-awareness, about change and innovation, and about system thinking. And can you share with us this story?
Absolutely. So again, I may veer a little bit between topics, but I would be glad to try and share with you some of what I've seen and experienced, and I look forward also to hearing from others. So personally, and I made some reference to this in the opening, I had the opportunity to, personally, I had the opportunity to witness when I was around 12, 13 years old, a change in society. And at the time, the then state president of South Africa had announced that they were considering changing the constitution of the country, that there will be a referendum regarding that. And of course, being a young kid or a teenager, you don't necessarily pay attention to the politics of the day. You know that it's a big thing for the adults. But as you grow up, and I was kind of 15, 16, you realize that what's going on around you and how you believe the world works is not necessarily how it actually works. Now, that's a realization that most teenagers probably have, or young people. Little did I know at the time just how profound the changes in our society is going to be. I had never quite understood how it was that, you know, my family and our friends had cars and big houses, and that many people who worked with us had to travel many kilometers on a bus. I did not know what their living conditions were, but at a certain point when I was little, they were not even allowed to be on the streets after a certain time at night. And so with the government announcing these changes to the constitution, or the pending changes to the constitution, one became a little bit more politically aware. As I was entering the final phases of my high school education, there was a very big moment with the release from prison of former President Nelson Mandela. I attended an all-boys, all-white school, and someone at the school had the foresight to realize that our lives are going to change a lot. And so they made available, through some political connection, the opportunity for us to act as waiters at President Mandela's inauguration, basically to be servants in a different capacity. Now, 2-3 years earlier, that would have been completely unthinkable. You don't realize the impact of those kind of situations until much later in your life sometimes. But one thing that it has taught me was this self-awareness about my role as an individual that perhaps doesn't have much power, but who can choose to take a different perspective on the reality that I'm faced with, and to take an inquiring perspective. In other words, to ask questions about what is actually going on behind the scenes. I'm not talking about some conspiracy theory nonsense or, you know, being a complete skeptic the whole time, but about being very honest with yourself and those around you when you, when you look into your own role in society or in business or in education. I wouldn't say that that led to greater self-awareness, but I think in hindsight, it was an increasing self-awareness about my role that put things into perspective for me. I don't think there's a formula for that necessarily, but it is something which one can encourage others to consider. I think it followed me in a way, in that when much later, and this is perhaps more in a professional context, but much later on, when I was in a position where I had just been promoted to senior manager in a large consultancy, and I was presenting to the partnership group a proposal that expanded our sustainability consulting services into various clients. And they asked me, this is all good and well, you're talking about all this sustainability and business intersection, and this was 2006, more or less. It's all good and well that you're talking about this stuff. It seems to be relevant. People seem to have an interest in it. But how are we going to make more money out of selling sustainability consulting? And I think that same awareness that one has to have, where you ask a critical question about the reality that you find yourself in, and the rules, the social constructs that dictate your own reality, which gave me a reason to pause and say, so I strongly believe that business can be a force for good. I'm playing this role of sustainability consultant, but the questions that are directed at me are all about how we're going to be making more money out of selling sustainability consulting. And there was a dissonance, there was a disconnect. And I think having cultivated some self-awareness and critical introspection about my role in all of that led me to, at the time, decide to no longer continue in that career. And then led me on to what I'm doing today, which is focused really on helping transform at a more systemic level, learning, education, and ultimately business and management education to develop globally responsible leaders. So let me maybe pause there and just check whether that's helpful. I didn't keep track of time.
No worries, it's really interesting and amazing story, so we're not also keeping track of time. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe I can ask a question, like in one point of view, to what extent this competency improved your personal and professional life?
Well, so I'm going to start with personal. I think I'm very fortunate, again, in the spirit of sharing a bit of a whole person narrative. I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful partner in life who's a very thoughtful and introspective person. And so I've learned a lot from Zilla, from my wife, when it's, insofar as, questioning perspectives and, kind of critical thinking is concerned. The reason I'm mentioning that is, I think as you make decisions either as a leader in an organization or as an active citizen who's concerned about what's going on, or, who's concerned about what's going on around you and wanting to play a role, or in a relationship to people close to you, family, friends, you often find yourself needing to make decisions about life and about things that are perhaps in your own small way, very big and important for you as an individual. Maybe in the bigger context or the bigger scheme of things are inconsequential to the course of human history. But still, we make meaning, we make meaning out of our existence, right? So I think this competency, or this, I guess, kind of awareness of the need for self-awareness and the need for critical introspection, and for understanding your place and your role and your purpose in the world, has helped me in many ways in my personal life, where where one needs to make, and I'm going to give you a mundane example, one needs to make a decision about the education of your children. You need to make a decision about where in the world do you live. We live, despite coronavirus's recent effects, we still live in a globalized world where professionals, especially people who graduate from business schools, often aspire to having careers in different parts of the world. And where you live, what you learn and how you learn, and ultimately how you lead, is of consequence. Which is why I said at the beginning of this interview, or before we started, that I'm finding it very difficult to separate the personal, the professional, and the systemic. At the GRLI, we always say that global responsibility is perhaps integrative responsibility at 3 levels. It's responsibility to the self, to me, responsibility to the other, the we, and responsibility to the whole, all of us. So me, we, all of us. And if anything, introspection and cultivating some form of self-awareness has made me more attuned to the continued need to integrate those 3 perspectives and those 3 levels. Can I think, act, and exist in a way that allows congruence or alignment between the self, the other, and the whole? It's something that I work with on a daily basis because of my role at the GRLI, but it requires constant work.
Thank you for that. If you want people to remember one key message from what you were talking about, what you would like to be?
Well, I had an interesting conversation about 2 years ago with someone who's done a lot of work in the area of living systems thinking and theory. And I know that you are emphasizing in this program also the importance of systems thinking. So I'm going to say a little bit more about this person in a short while. I would add that we need to act like systems. We need to realize that our individual actions is part of a bigger collective. And if we want the system to change, that change starts with us, with me. So the person I was referring to is Myron Rodgers, who integrated a lot of his work and research on living systems theory into a number of maxims. Now, I'm not usually someone who subscribes to a short bullet point list or formula of success. But he shortly after I spoke to him about 2 years ago, he integrated his maxims on living systems into a single sentence, which for me has been immensely valuable, and which is what I'd like to leave with those participating. He said, the process you use to get to the future is the future you get. The process you use to get to the future is the future you get. And I think it beautifully references the understanding or acknowledges the understanding that our actions creates impact, that we are part of living systems. And I would encourage, for those of you who are interested in this work, to have a look at what some other authors and practitioners in the space of living systems theory has done. But that's the one kind of thing that I think for me over the last couple of years has been incredibly helpful to keep reminding myself of.
Thank you so much. And Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for giving really amazing answers to all of the questions we had. And I will ask you for the closure, like to share with us a practice that you would recommend to help people learn these competences that you learned and that you talked about.
I think there's something that that I would like to leave. I don't know whether it's a practice, but it's something that you can all do immediately, and that I can encourage you to do professionally. I referenced this practice of developing a whole person biography or a whole person narrative. And our own stories change the whole time as we grow and as we learn and as we develop. But the one thing that's very often missing is the relational elements. We tend to get into a mode of transacting, especially in business and management. Things become extremely transactional. And what's often missing is the relational. That connection that I spoke about, the connection to the self, the other, and the whole. In other words, the understanding that we're in relationship. So one thing I'd like to encourage is that, if you haven't done so yet, is to develop your own whole person narrative, your story that describes you in context as a whole human being. Education often emphasizes the rational, analytical, intellectual, often leaving aside our physical, emotional, spiritual aspects or dimensions. What is your story that describes you as a whole human being and that will help you relate not only to your own practice, but also to others and to the whole? So that's the one thing I'd like to encourage.
Thank you so much once again, and thank you for your time and participation in this program. We very much appreciate, and I'm sure that people and students of this program will learn a lot from this story, and hope to see you sometime soon.
Oh, it's an absolute privilege. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and it's way too short. I'd love to learn more about what others are sharing as well. And I'd love to hear from all the participants in the program. Please reach out to the GRLI, connect with us on Twitter at the GRLI, and add me on LinkedIn. So I'd like to learn more about what you guys are doing.